The man pulled the trigger and believed no one saw him. The street was loud, the moment was fast, and the witnesses were far away. Or so he thought. Years later, two men would sit in prison cells, labeled enemies of the nation, while the country argued over one question that refused to die. Did someone really see them? And if they did, why did it take so long to matter? The handcuffs snapped shut under the hot sun. Police pushed the two men forward as cameras flashed and voices shouted. Nicola Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti did not resist. They didn't run. They didn't fight. They already knew something terrible was happening. They were immigrants. They were anarchists. And now they were accused of murder. What no one knew yet was that this case would become one of the most controversial in American history. And it all came down to a moment someone thought was unseen. But before the trials, before the arguments, before the prison walls closed in forever, there was a single afternoon that changed everything. April 15th, 1920. A quiet street in South Braintree, Massachusetts. A shoe factory was closing for the day. Workers were leaving. The paymaster carried a metal box filled with wages. Everything looked normal. Then it happened. Two men approached. Shots were fired. The paymaster and his guard fell to the ground. The attackers ran. The entire event lasted seconds. No one chased them. No one screamed their names. No one stopped them. And the men who did it believed they vanished into the crowd. But people were watching. Not up close, not clearly, from a distance. Some were looking out windows. Some stood across the street. Some barely understood what they saw. But later, those distant glances would become powerful weapons. In the days after the crime, fear spread fast. The country was tense. Bombings had happened. Anarchists were blamed. Immigrants were watched closely. Police weren't just hunting criminals. They were hunting ideas. Sacco and Vanzetti fit the picture perfectly. They were Italian immigrants. They spoke with accents. They believed the government was corrupt. They had avoided the draft during World War I. To authorities, that made them dangerous. When police brought them in for questioning, the men were nervous. They lied about small things. They hid their beliefs. They feared deportation more than prison. That fear made them look guilty. And that was enough. In the investigation, witnesses began to come forward. People who said they had seen the crime. People who were not sure, but sure enough. One witness said he saw a man who looked like Sacco pulling the trigger. Another said the man resembled Vanzetti. No one said they were certain, but certainty wasn't required. The case moved fast. The trial was loud. The courtroom was packed. Newspapers chose sides. Protesters filled the streets. Some demanded justice. Others demanded punishment. The judge made his views clear. He did not trust anarchists. He did not trust immigrants. And he did not hide it. Sacco and Vanzetti sat quietly as witnesses took the stand. Each claimed they had been far away. Each admitted the moment was fast. But together, their words formed a story. A story that said someone had seen them.
The defense fought back. They presented alibis. They brought in witnesses who placed the men elsewhere. They argued that the identification was weak. But fear is louder than logic. The jury listened. They deliberated. And then they decided. Guilty. The sentence was death. The world reacted with shock. Writers, scientists, workers, protesters, they all questioned the verdict. Was this justice, or was it fear wearing a uniform? Years passed. Appeals were filed. New evidence appeared. Witnesses changed their stories. Some admitted they weren't sure of what they saw. But the state refused to bend. Behind bars, Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti waited. They wrote letters. They spoke of innocence. They spoke of belief. They spoke of being judged not for what they did, but for who they were. Then something unexpected happened. A witness came forward again. Someone who had seen more than they first admitted. Someone who had stood far away and watched everything. and what this person revealed would shake the case to its core. But the courts were running out of patience, and time was running out for the men who thought no one saw them. The next decision would seal their fate forever, and once it was made, there would be no turning back. Stay with me. The prison doors closed with a sound that echoed for years. Nicola Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti were now numbers, not names. Stone walls replaced daylight. Guards replaced freedom. Outside, the world argued about their guilt. Inside, time slowed to a crawl. But the case was not finished, not even close. As months passed, something strange began to happen. People who had once stayed quiet started to speak. Journalists dug deeper. Lawyers looked again at the witness statements, and cracks began to show. The witnesses, those distant eyes, those quick glances that had sent two men toward death. One witness admitted he had only seen shapes. Another said the man he pointed out looked different in court than he did on the street. A third confessed that police pressure made him feel like he had to choose someone. None of them said it loudly, none of them said it clearly, but doubt was growing. Outside the prison, protests grew larger. Workers marched, signs were raised, voices filled the streets. People around the world asked the same question. What if they were wrong? The government felt the pressure. Appeals were reviewed. Judges read transcripts. New hearings were scheduled.
Hope flickered. Then came the man no one expected. A prisoner, a criminal, someone with nothing to gain. His name was Celestino Medeiros. He was already serving time for another crime, and one night, inside a cold prison cell, he told another inmate something that could change everything. He said he knew who committed the robbery and murders, and it wasn't Sacco or Vanzetti. According to Medeiros, the crime was done by a different group, a professional gang, men who had committed robberies before, men who had escaped. He said Sacco and Vanzetti were innocent. When the confession reached the outside world, it exploded like fire. Supporters believed this was the missing truth, the final proof, the answer that would save two lives. But the state did not rush to listen. Officials questioned the confession. They said Medeiros was lying. They said he wanted attention. They said it was too late. Still, the defense pushed forward. They asked for a new trial. They demanded the confession be heard. They wanted the witnesses questioned again. The courtroom filled once more. This time, the air felt different. Witnesses returned to the stand. Their voices shook. Some admitted uncertainty. Some could not remember clearly. Some avoided eye contact. Years had passed. Memories fade. Fear changes people. But one truth stood firm. No witness had ever seen the crime clearly. Not one. They were all far away. They all saw it quickly. They all filled in the blanks later. The judge listened, and then he ruled. He denied the new trial. The confession was dismissed. The doubts were ignored. The sentence remained. Death. The reaction was immediate and fierce. Protests spread across cities and countries. Famous writers spoke out. Scientists signed letters. Even some officials admitted discomfort. But the law stood still. Behind bars, Sacco and Vanzetti felt the weight of time pressing harder. Each appeal failed. Each door closed.
They spent their days writing letters, talking quietly, remembering their families, remembering freedom. Sacco worried about his children. Vanzetti spoke about justice. Neither man stopped claiming innocence. As execution dates were discussed, the world watched closely. Then came another twist. A new review was ordered, not because of innocence, but because of doubt. The governor of Massachusetts announced an investigation. A committee would review the case. evidence, testimony, the fairness of the trial. For a moment, hope burned bright. People believed this was it. The truth would finally be seen. The committee worked in silence. Weeks passed. No updates, no promises. And then, the report was released. It said the trial was fair. It said the verdict was sound. It said the sentence would stand. The words hit like a hammer. There would be no more appeals, no more chances, no more time. The execution date was set, August 23rd, 1927. As the day approached, crowds gathered outside the prison. Some prayed, some shouted, some cried. The world held its breath. Inside, Sacco and Vanzetti prepared for the end. They were offered final words. Sacco spoke of innocence, of love, of hope beyond death. Vanzetti spoke of injustice, of being judged not for actions, but for beliefs. Neither begged, neither broke. When the switch was pulled, the case was over, or so it seemed, because even after death, the questions refused to die. Years later, more evidence surfaced, more doubts, more admissions of bias, more acknowledgement that fear and politics had shaped the outcome. Decades later, the state officially admitted the trial was unfair, but it was too late. 2 men were already gone, and the witness, who unknowingly saw the crime from far away, had helped set it all in motion. In the final chapter, we confront the truth that no court could erase, the truth about what justice really means, and why this case still matters today. Don't look away. The truth came back from the dead. Years after the prison lights went dark, after the crowd went home, after the chairs were cleaned and stored away, the case refused to stay buried. It returned in whispers first, then in documents, then in a confession that no one could ignore anymore. In the 1950s and 1960s, historians reopened the files. Old police reports were read again, slowly this time. Court transcripts were studied line by line. Words that once seemed normal now felt dangerous.
Bias, fear, politics, they were everywhere. One report showed that the judge had openly spoken against anarchists outside the courtroom. Another revealed that evidence helping the defense was never shared. Witnesses who were unsure were pushed to sound confident. Immigrant accents were mocked. Beliefs were treated like crimes. This was not just a trial. It was a message. The government at that time was terrified. Bombings had happened. Workers were angry. Anarchists were loud. Immigrants were blamed. People wanted someone to punish. Sacco and Vanzetti fit the picture too well. Italian, poor, radical ideas. And once the system decided they were guilty, everything else bent to make it true. Even science. Ballistics evidence was presented as fact, even though experts later admitted it was unclear. The gun tests were rushed. The conclusions were shaky. But in court, they were treated as final truth. Years later, modern experts reviewed the same evidence and said the same thing. It was not conclusive. It never was. Then came a moment that changed everything again. In 1961, a new ballistics test was done using better technology. The results suggested the fatal bullet may have come from Sacco's gun. Some people said this proved guilt. Others said it proved nothing, because evidence alone never told the whole story. The bigger question remained. Even if one piece pointed towards Sacco, was the trial fair? The answer kept coming back the same. No. In 1977, 50 years after the executions, the governor of Massachusetts made a historic move. Michael Dukakis officially reviewed the case. After months of research, he issued a statement that echoed across the country. Sacco and Vanzetti had not received a fair trial. They were judged in an atmosphere of fear and prejudice. Justice had failed them. The state did not declare them innocent, but it admitted something just as powerful. They were wronged. For the families, it was a painful victory. No apology could bring them back.
No statement could erase the electric chair.
But history had finally spoken. The world now teaches this case as a warning about what happens when fear controls justice, a warning about how easy it is to confuse beliefs with guilt, a warning about witnesses who think they saw something but didn't truly know what they were seeing. That man who believed no one saw him, he was wrong, but not in the way he thought. He believed the crime was unseen. In reality, the crime everyone missed was not the robbery. It was the trial itself. It was the way 2 lives were taken, not by bullets, but by silence, pressure, and fear. Today, their names are spoken in classrooms, in books, in protests, in courtrooms, not as criminals, but as symbols. Symbols of how justice can fail. Symbols of how immigrants can be punished for who they are. Symbols of why every witness, every word, every doubt matters. And yet, one final question still hangs in the air. If the same fear returned today, would we do any better? Or would history repeat itself once more? Stay with me. The silence after the executions was loud. For a long time, no one wanted to talk about Sacco and Vanzetti. The prison gates were closed, the files were boxed up, the chairs were locked away. Officials said the case was finished, but the truth does not stay quiet forever. It waits. Families remembered, workers remembered, immigrants remembered. The names Sacco and Vanzetti did not fade. They grew heavier with time. In homes and libraries, people read the trial records again. They noticed things that once seemed small: a judge's words, a witness's pause, a question that was never asked. Each detail felt like a crack in a wall that had been called justice. One question came up again and again. How could a case built on distant witnesses decide life and death? The witnesses never stood close. They never saw faces clearly. They never heard names. They only saw movement, fear, and chaos from far away. Yet their words were treated as solid truth. Years later, some of those witnesses spoke privately. A few admitted doubt. A few admitted pressure. One said he felt pushed to choose someone, anyone, just to make the question stop. But the courts never reopened the case, because reopening it would mean admitting something worse than a mistake. It would mean admitting the system failed.
Systems do not like to admit failure. Instead, the story changed shape. It became a lesson, a warning told in law schools and history classes, a reminder that justice is not just about evidence, it is about fairness. Sacco and Vanzetti became symbols of something larger. They were not just 2 men. They were immigrants in a frightened country. They were workers in a tense time. They were believers in ideas the government feared. And because of that, every action they took was judged through suspicion. Even their silence was seen as guilt. The world slowly accepted a painful truth. Even if no one ever fully proves who fired the shots that day in South Braintree, something else is clear. The trial was not equal. The voices were not balanced. The fear was louder than the facts. And that is why the case still matters, because it asks a question that never goes away. When fear rises, who pays the price? History shows us the answer is often the same: those who are different, those who speak differently, those who believe differently. The man who thought no one saw him was wrong. Someone always sees. Sometimes it is a witness across the street. Sometimes it is history itself, watching quietly and waiting to speak. For Sacco and Vanzetti, history spoke too late, but it did speak. Their names were cleared of shame, even if not of guilt.
Their trial was recognized as unfair. Their story became a symbol taught to new generations, not to reopen wounds, but to prevent new ones. Because justice is fragile. It depends on honesty. It depends on courage. It depends on people willing to question what feels comfortable. And when those things disappear, injustice walks in easily. The story of Sacco and Vanzetti ends in silence. 2 men, 2 chairs, 1 switch. But the lesson does not end there. It lives on every time a witness is unsure.